Curse words and sarcasm were used in the making of this video. Hello, Jamie back with Salty Card Creations for Ink Road stamps using Beary Icons and Full Circle Snark, and trying something new. So I had this idea and I wanted to give it a go. And so I tested it out. It worked pretty good. I tried to do the whole, candle melting the wax thing. It just takes forever because my candle wasn't, I don't know, just wasn't like heat. If you start it and it's warm or hot, but I'm impatient. So impatience, I go, yeah. I just use my heat tool to melt the wax and go from there. So I grabbed, I think about 3 little wax pellets is what I ended up using for these. 3 to 4, you could probably get away with 4 being a nice and bulky one. 3 was probably your minimum. Sometimes it worked better than others. It really depended upon how detailed my stamp was and how, much impression. The adult one here did not work the greatest. I ended up remelting it and resetting it again. So what I did was I melted it, I poured it out. Kind of as I went, I learned a little bit better, like if you take the heat gun and you spread it out a little bit before you put the stamp on there, it really kind of helped a little bit more, especially on the bigger circle ones. Now, I also let it sit for just a little bit, so this is sped up, of course, but I let it sit a little bit and kind of cool off. I wasn't too worried about melting the actual stamp because it's not, I don't think it's that hot, but you really have to worry about if your wax is going to be hot enough. So I started with the one that I was willing to sacrifice, okay? So if you have a stamp set that you're not in love with and you want to give it a try, I would definitely say go that route first. This one, I knew it was going to work. I think I've seen it done before, but I was like, I'm pretty sure it's going to work. So I sacrificed the one that I was willing to part with if it didn't work, like if it melted my stamp and ruined it. So I was, let it sit on there, let it dry, and then you can peel it off slowly and carefully. So just, proceed with caution. I did do some of them. I stamped with the VersaMark ink because that seemed to let it go. Now, I wonder if I would have stamped with StazOn and then stamped them, if it would have created, a darker effect on the lettering. Now, the bigger, like I think it's the what the fuck, the one that I ended up using, which is what the fuck, and I think and I can't stress this enough, right? So it's super teeny tiny writing and sentiment. Now, you can actually see it on the finished one. It is harder. Now, it was, I was like, so ecstatic that it actually worked. But that was kind of the whole start, and my color combos kind of went from it. So I picked out 2 of my wax seals, and I decided to create some cards from them. So I brought in the Beary Icon set from Ink Road Stamps, and I had 2 that kind of went color-wise together because I had done like that burgundy color or maroon color, and then I'd kind of gone with a lighter pink color and a white. I think the white was pearlescent. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it kind of had the same vibe to it color-wise, and so I definitely, went with those ones. I created a color palette, marker palette just for that one, and I went from there. I really have been in love with kind of monochromatic cards lately, and so you might be seeing a little bit more of them. Maybe not here, but on my other channel, Inky and Scrappy, as well. So I brought those in, and then once I had everything stamped out, so I used the little middle finger for my what the fuck one, and then the other one that says don't care. I think, let's see which one. Let me grab that one. I used I had my patience tested. It was negative, so I used that one for that, the don't care bear. So I start by going in, and I haven't colored this caribou before, so this was my first go at it. So it's a little bit slower going first time around, but I usually lay in that darkest, where my shadows are first. I always color darkest to lightest. It's just kind of how I work. And then, of course, if you feel like because alcohol markers will fade the color that's underneath. It's an alcohol. So it's a lot like when you're playing with alcohol inks and you use rubbing alcohol, where it'll dissipate the color out. Not so, it'll move it, but it'll also dissipate it out or lessen the intensity, I guess. And so alcohol markers kind of work in the same fashion and or way. So I always start with my darkest and work to my lightest, and then if I feel I lost some of that shadow or that depth in my darkest tones, I will come back in and hit them with the dark one, and not always have to go back in with a lighter tone to blend it in, because it should, if it's still wet, it should kind of blend in with your other marker that has already been down there. So, and if you think you got it too dark and you want to make it lighter, you can go with the colorless blender, and you should be able to push some of that color out, and that'll help, you know, blend it a little bit better as well. And if it doesn't look great the first coloring, go over it with a second layer of alcohol ink coloring in the same order, and it will definitely kind of help blend it together better, if that helps. So if you look at my blending sheet, it's like a hot mess. It doesn't look nearly as good as my actual image does, just because I don't work that blend at all. I just scribble on and I go with it. I just want to make sure that my colors, color palette wise, are going to work together. Now I brought in this like peachy combination that I came up with. I think I have a picture of it. It will be on my blog, on my inkyandScrappy.com blog. It has all of my Ohuhu marker blends. Now I kind of pulled some from my Ohuhu line, my Ohuhu Honolulu line, and my Oahu line. So the Oahu line is the bullet nib. The Honolulu line is the brush nib. I actually have the Honolulu B's, which are brush and bullet, so it kind of gives me the best of both worlds there. But there's probably, when we're talking markers, there's probably about 150-ish different colors in each set, if that makes sense. I don't know. I have the conversion chart on my Etsy shop. The link to it is also on my blog. But so all of them are listed there on that conversion chart, but I'm still working on getting my actual swatches done for them. It's a labor of love, right? So I'm working on it. It's going, you know, ever so slowly. But I do try to add, if I think a color is going to work in place of something that's only in the one line and not in the other. And if you have an issue or you have a question like, hey, I have this line and you have this color combo, is there something similar in the other one? Please shoot me a message below. I can always answer those questions. The coordinating video that color chart might be on really helps. But yeah, I can definitely check them out. It doesn't, you know, I just don't always do it because it does take a bunch of time. So for this one, I did some tip to tip with that colorless blender. I wanted a lighter pink and I just wasn't finding it. I ended up going back in later on with a different, with I think the lightest tone in my peach over the belly area, because I just wasn't happy with how it was. It just didn't go with the rest. I wanted it to blend in with the rest of the card a little bit better, so I did end up going back in with a little bit of peach. So for my backgrounds here, I'm coming in with the two stamps that I picked for my wax seal, because you can't read them the greatest, and I wanted to be able to say, you know, to show you what they said without you trying to like squint and read the little tiny text, right? So I brought in Lawn Fawn's Rose Gold Embossing Powder. It's not really gold. It's kind of like a metallic, I don't know. It's like a metallic pinkish gold. I don't know. It's gorgeous. It's just not a rose gold in true rose gold to me. Anyways, I did that one with VersaMark Ink, and then for my other one, I'm bringing in VersaFine Onyx Black and stamping that all out, and then I will cover that with some clear embossing powder. This is Ranger's Ultra Fine Clear Embossing Powder, and I will heat set that as well. Now for the VersaMark one, if you can't, you can see it if you tip it in the light, just so as you saw that I was kind of doing there. You can kind of see where you stamped. I wasn't 100% impressed with my stamping on them, but I knew that I was going to cover it up anyway, so it really wasn't going to matter. And yes, I burnt my paper. It's okay. I was ink blending over it anyways. So once I had my images colored, I kind of went to my Distress Oxides and figured out the best blend that went with the marker blend that I had created. And so I came up with Aged Mahogany and Victorian Velvet and Tattered Rose. And then of course I brought in Black Soot to darken up the one that I wanted, you know, to have the darker blend on. So the one I did not use the Tattered Rose on, and then the other one I used. So I kind of used 3 colors on each panel. You definitely could have done all 4 on each panel. And so to me, I don't have a Tattered Rose started yet, so I usually use the re-inker, and I re-ink my pad at the same time I start a new sponge dauber. It works really well. It, like, I don't know, it kind of primes your sponge dauber. I say I have sponge daubers for each individual color when it comes to my Oxide inks and for my Distress inks, just because usually when I sponge daub, I want the color that I'm using to be the color that I'm using. It's different when I do it than with the brushes, I think. It just has a, I don't know. It blends faster than the brushes for sure, so if that's something that you struggle with, if you're looking for full backgrounds, I would definitely say sponge dauber, dome foams are the way to go. I've gotten the best results with them. I did spritz it with water, kind of sopped it up with my rag, and then I'm coming in with Brutus Monroe's Aqua Pigments in, I think it's Blue Frost. It's one of their frost ones. I'm pretty sure it's Blue Frost that's in my dish there. And then I just splattered that. And then, of course, I brought in the Tattered Rose, added a little bit of water, and splattered that on top as well. And once I am done with that, I will set those off to dry. And then I had to figure out what in the world I was doing with the rest of my card. So I brought in some thin vellum here, and I'm just kind of cutting it on the side of my desk. I wanted it to have that rip edge. I just like the look. And, you know, this way it kind of makes, I wanted my bear to kind of pop off that background. It is dark, it is kind of busy, and it definitely goes with the bear. You know, that whole monochromatic thing. So I did pop my bear up on some foam adhesive, and then I put that on top of my vellum, and then I will come in with my glue and strategically gluing it right below the Care Bear there, so you don't see the glue coming through the vellum. And my twine kicked my ass, so I had to cut out about 5 minutes of footage of just me trying to unravel said twine. Don't ask. It is what it is. So I'm just going to loop that around 3 times, tie it in a little knot, and then to figure out how to put on and where to put on my wax seals. Like, I had this idea in my head when I started, and then of course when I got this far 2 days later, I was like, where was I putting the wax seal again? Yeah. So I did end up kind of sandwiching my adhesive foam around it, because I wanted it to sit on top of the twine, but I didn't want it to like be bumpy. Because the other thing is sending them, I don't want them to be, I don't know, I don't want them to break in the mail. So I figured if I did it this way, it's not going to press on that twine and cause a break, hopefully, fingers crossed. So once I was happy with that, I'm going to add some liquid adhesive and then add that onto my black card base here. Make sure it is as centered as my eyeballs will allow it and semi-straight. Yeah. So then I'm going to set that one off to the side and come to the next one. Now, I had planned on doing these kind of both the same, and then I got here and I was like, I wasn't in love with this one's vellum overlay or underlay. And I was like, I don't know if I like that. So I decided to bring in a little piece of black cardstock. It kind of coordinates with that black embossed sentiment in the background, and it kind of, I don't know, it just went, to me it just went a little bit better with my actual background. And then, you know, because I'm thinking this is how I'm going to go, right? So I add my foam adhesive or my foam squares here, and then I'm going to pop that off and pop that onto my card base. Usually I always do glue on top of it. It gives you a little bit of wiggle room, so if you're not happy with placement, you can kind of wiggle it around where you want it a little bit easier, and you're less likely to have issues. Now, I had planned on putting this one right over the top of one of my stamped images. I hated it. So I ended up peeling it back off, and I brought in another piece of black cardstock cut from the same. I ended up cutting the one from the bottom on a die with the die, and so I cut the one on the top with the die and cut it so it kind of looks like, I don't know, it's a full black panel, but it's not really a full black panel, if you know what I mean. It kind of gives the illusion of that matte without taking all of the background, without covering up all that gorgeous background. So I needed to add a sentiment for this one. And so for this one, I just grabbed a piece of scratch paper. I was thinking that the ivory, when I grabbed it, was going to be closer to my coloring on my ink. I did stamp it in VersaMark Onyx Black ink and then covered it with some clear embossing powder. Heat set that, and then I will also do a similar thing on this one. So for the one, I brought in the Poison Kitty sentiment for this one, and then the other one I used the Bearable stamp set for the You Don't Want to Poke This Bear. And so I heat set the other one on black using that rose gold embossing powder again. And now I was like, it just needed some ink blending over the top of this one. So it was going to go a little bit better with my cardstock. So I just used whatever was on my sponge daubers here and kind of went that route. I did bring in that Victorian velvet on the end, so it kind of had a little bit more of a pinky tone to it. And then, of course, buffing that off with my cloth. And then I'll bring in some foam adhesive strips here, and I will add those onto the back. And so then I can pop up my sentiment. And then playing with placement, because, I'm never happy with my initial placement, which is where I end up going. But, I have to make sure it's exactly where I wanted it. So then I'm going to bring in the other one as well and do that same thing, and I will pop that one towards the bottom. It kind of gives it a diagonal focal on that one. And so I'm pretty sure I'm complete with this one. That one it just looks like it needs a little something. So the top kind of has that splash of lighter coloring on it, and so I felt this one on the bottom needed a little something too. So I brought in some white clay hearts, I think the Recollections brand, and then I'm bringing in my peach toned marker here. I think it's the lightest one of them. It's the one that I ended up using coloring on the belly and the foot and the snout, just to kind of color coordinate with the rest of my card. And I'm just going to put 3 little hearts on there to go with my little Don't Care Bear. And at this point, you will see my final photos. And about 2 days later, Kate and I had been on Crafty Chat, and I showed her what I did. And she's like, oh, that's cool, but they're really hard to read. I'm like, I know they're hard to read. I'm like, I just couldn't figure out how. And then so we were talking, and I'm like, well, maybe acrylic paint. And then, of course, later the next day, I was like thinking about it. I'm like, wait a minute, alcohol inks would work, I think. So I brought in some black alcohol ink and kind of dabbed them. I tried it on my other 3 that I had laying around. So the purple one I started with, and I did some black ink on that one. So once I had it on there, I just put a couple of drops on there, took some rubbing alcohol and a paintbrush, and kind of moved it around. And then brought in a alcohol wet wipe. I don't know. It's a wet wipe, but it's alcohol. So just a wet wipe with it's an alcohol wet wipe. I don't know. I get them off the farm, so they don't cost me anything because we already have them and they work wonders. So I took that and kind of erased the raised part, and so my colors kind of stuck in there and it worked. I also brought in some gilded, I think it's the mixative, the alcohol rubbing out, or the alcohol ink mixative or additive. Is it an additive? It's the alloy. Sorry. I'll get it eventually. So I brought that one in for my black one. I brought the black one in, and then of course for this one's like a blackish maroon, and I used the gold one on that one as well. And then of course, yes, see how you can actually read the words now? I was like so psyched. So of course I had to bring in my finished cards and pray to the gods that I didn't mess them up too badly. I did end up accidentally touching my sentiment on the one, so I probably should have covered it up. I did end up with some little black splatters, which I wasn't sad about because they went perfectly with the rest of my card. But for the most part, I just ended up coming in with a little brush and kind of covering up some of that black ink that got on the sentiment there. It turned out okay. I wasn't too sad about it. And I was just happy that you could actually read the words. And so I do love the finished ones. And no, I did not take new pictures. So I hope you have an amazing day. If you try this and it works, let me know. Please don't ruin any of your stamps. Bye!